given encouragement, and without they wouldn't have been able to continue in their own way.
Of all the great artists of the Impressionist age, Pissarro is unquestionably one of the greatest. By the time of his death in 1903, his art had enabled him to triumph over poverty, obscurity and doubt. And though his son Lucien went on to become a well-known artist himself, it's the work of Camille Pissarro that remains his finest legacy. His rural landscapes, his images of labour, his great series paintings, even his neo-impressionist work. In total, it remains a mighty achievement, a radical artist's response to the ideas and techniques of one of the most remarkable ages in history of art.
Sinak Arts, hello. Rhinook Money, hi, hello.
Nawawala ng pusa ang ilo overtime. It's a bit, kapag ang may namin, outer layer ng ipin ay lumipis overtime, hindi na ito may babalik sa dati. Kaya, may nilo, patuloy na mararamdaman ng pangingilo kapag ito ay pinabayaan at maaari pa itong mas lumala. Kaya gumamit ng Sensodyne para tuloy-tuloy mo protektahan ang ipin sa nilo. Ngayon, abot kaya na.
May Armenta, I already left my like from Mexico. Hello, thank you. Thank you, Masha, beautiful, just wow. Thank you, Masha.
But there was also a more respectable element, including bankers, such as Auguste Degas. On July the 19th, 1834, his son was born there, Hilaire Germain Edgar. While he was still a child, Edgar moved with his parents from the Saint-Georges district of Paris to the area of the Luxembourg Gardens, to what was then Rue de l'Ouest, now Rue d'Assas, and then on to Rue Madame.
Sinak Arts, tomorrow is my art competition, so I confuse what portrait I draw, Mr. Bean or Albert Einstein. Please suggest me.
He seldom mentioned her in later life, whilst he frequently liked
If it is a school competition, I think Einstein would be a better choice.
Degas was an average student. He was often described
But if it's not, I think Mr. Bean is also a very interesting character to draw on paper, especially when he's doing like facial caricature.
nothing would have made one think
It's very
he
nice
was
to
a
draw
dangerous
also.
genius in the making. However, after completing his schooling, Degas decided on a career in art, and on 7th of April 1853, a few days after leaving school, he was given permission to copy at the Louvre. We are still unsure why he chose his path so quickly, but it was a decision that would affect the history of it. It wasn't long before the young Degas began attending classes with the painter Louis Lamothe. In 1855, he was admitted to the prestigious École des Beaux-Arts, coming 33rd in the entrance competition. It was around this time that Degas met Ingres and followed the latter's advice when he told the young painter, after seeing some examples of the work of Degas, "Never from nature, young man, always from memory and the engravings of masters." this and other advice, Degas sought to capture in the work of his predecessors the correctness of expression, the right formula, the technical secrets he wanted to incorporate in his own paintings. He distilled from these masters the inevitable biases that are the foundation of an artist's work. In the late 1850s, he used pencil to copy a chalk drawing, portrait of a young woman, attributed to Leonardo da Vinci. He did this time and again, not just copies or dull reproductions, but subtle variations on an old theme. In 1856,
Erickson, sir, saan mas maganda mag-draw? Sa loob na may incandescent lamp or sa labas natural light? Ideally, mas maganda sa labas with natural light. Kaya lang, parang ang sarap niya kung nasa ano ka, di ba, yung malamig na country. Nasa ano ka, nasa porch. Parang ang sarap sa ganun. Pero dito sa atin, sa Philippines, sobrang init. Kahit naka-electric fan ka, kung pawisin yung kamay mo, hindi advisable sa labas. Although, meron naman ng nabibili ng mga light na parang sobrang lakas, parang natural na rin naman.
But, just as he was complaining about portrait painting being boring, he finished one of his most important oil paintings of the time, Family Portrait, later renamed the Bellini family.
Bellini family is an interesting painting in the context of 19th century images. On one hand, it's a very traditional conversation piece, a family conversation piece. If we then begin to analyse it in terms of the relationship to Pirantel, this of course is his own family, which almost like his family, and it's quite clear, just look at the careful composition, is actually telling us about the relationship within that family.
It's here that Degas begins to show a taste for domestic drama, a tendency, as the writer Paul Jameau put it, to lay bare the hidden bitterness between the figures, even when they seem to be presented to us as merely portraits.
In this painting, one would expect to see happy smiling faces. What we see is the Baron, virtually with his back to us. The Baroness, she's standing in the middle of the room. She's very erect, rather aloof, rather proud, and her children, her daughters, are with her.
His wife's expression is disdainful and cold. The little girls, I think, are fine, but there's obviously something happening between the two adults which is not quite comfortable.
It would therefore give us indication that family was not necessarily a happy family. It was a respectable.
Hello, Ralph. Hello. Good evening.
In the autumn of 1859, the painter returned to Paris and moved into a spacious studio in the part of Paris where he'd been born. With a return to Paris, he also returned to history painting and tackled his largest historical canvas, The Daughter of Jepton, in an effort to emulate the sweeping works of his then hero, Delacroix. At last, Degas indulged in the delights of colour, using
Kakauwi ko lang from
juxtapositions of tone and scattered explosions of vibrancy across the whole painting. With another historical canvas, Semiramis building Babylon, Degas employed another unconventional technique with his use of essence, which is oil paint in which the oil has been blotted and thinned with turpentine, then applied to woven paper mounted on canvas.
He tends to use this word paint in essence, Now, in fact, this was a sort of method he adopted to dry out the liquid oil. And he soaked off excess, what he considered excess oil, out of leaving what we call short, sticky, stiff, which you could then apply. And indeed, in some ways, you can't, if you look up close, you can't tell the difference between pastel and this dry, short oil.
Degas used colour differently to the other Impressionists. His use of colour is restrained in his ballet dance pictures, the ones of the 70s. He used white, sometimes pink, sometimes a little touch of pink or a little touch of red. And that could be the only bright colour in the whole painting. When he did his outdoor paintings, for example, with the resonances, the colours there could be very, very strong. But again, he didn't use a lot of colours. It wasn't until he started doing his pastels in the later part of his life, in the 80s and 90s, that he really went wild with colour.
Between 1859 and 1865, Degas turned out an enormous volume of work, which, nevertheless, left him feeling that he was not progressing. He became completely taken up with his subject, which left him seeming aloof and grumpy. His impatience with people was becoming legendary even then. Then, around 1865, things started to change. With his painting, Seeing a War,
Erickson.
he was
So sabi nila,
finally
di advisable gumamit ng plastic cover
which he
or
continued
acetate sa pag-protect ng charcoal graphite and colored pencil drawings kasi hindi acid-free ang plastic cover at makaka-affect yan sa drawing. Hindi ako masyadong sure pero para safe siguro paper na lang. Yung parang wax paper.
As well as his art, his friendships were in transition too. His relations with Gustave Moreau, one of his closest friends up to this point, seemed to have cooled. And he barely saw another close friend, Bonner, after 1863.
Manyak Yadav, what's going out in your behind?
Who shared his taste and cultural background. But more than
If you're talking about the talking,
be the most important.
it's a documentary that I'm listening.
It is understood that they met in 1860
Maybe it's too loud.
in the Louvre, where Degas
I will
was etching a
try
copy of
to
Velasquez's
lower
painting
the
directly onto the plate.
volume. Mark Molo, may method ka ba, Kuya BMD? Method? Anong method?
Advice when it became clear that it wasn't turning out as well as he might have wanted. So, an important and enduring friendship.
Both Degas and Moreau came from secular society. They were both
Let's say...
But Degas, in the early part, his own career,
Yeah, grid method. Yun yung pinaka
spirit,
okay. Lalo na for beginners.
and when he met Manet in Bourg, Manet introduced him to contemporary art, the ideas of contemporary theme, so that Degas in a way came to the idea of painting modern contemporary subjects rather later. But his sense of where that contemporary idea was leading probably in the end led him further than Manet himself as well.
It's difficult to weed out fact from fiction in regard to these two giants of late 19th century art, but their bond seemed at its strongest in the 1870s.
Naghihirap pa rin ako sa shade eh.
Carried away by the notion of
Go lang ng go. Madadalian ka rin later pag na figure out mo na.
Manet cruelly attacked
Basta layer after layer lang, magaan lang, tapos diretso blend, tapos layer ulit.
His ambition and the celebrity he had enjoyed ever since the Salon de la Fontaine, an exhibition of painting that had been rejected by the Salon.
Related between the Impressionists, not necessarily.
Ralph, Kuya BMD, meron po akong binili na mga contemporary picture frame po.
Yes, indeed. Affecting trouble in the sense that
Ano yung glass or plastic? Yung yung cover niya. Kasi meron din parang mga plastic or glass stick.
A theme which recurs again and again in Degas' work is his interest in race colours, which began after his many holidays in Normandy with his friends, the Valpensons, starting in 1861. Their estate, Manille-Dugas, was near the racetrack at Argenteuil, and the rustic setting reminded Degas of the English coloured prints he loved so much.
Ralph. Itong picture frame na yan po, di na kailangan ng nails. Acetate po siya. Kaya tapos no need for drilling kasi adhesive to the wall. Okay. Flament Petrov, looking good. Thank you so much.
Where he was known for his cutting wit and his uncompromising artistic views as much as for his breadth of knowledge. The Salon exhibitions between 1865 and 1870 provided him with his only chance of public exposure. The works he exhibited received mixed reviews. More important than this, Degas was not selling. Clearly, the institution of the Salon was not the right venue for his work. For him, the breakaway Impressionist exhibitions of the 1870s and 80s were to be far more successful. Before this, the decade of the 1860s can be seen as a generally calm one for Degas. He was fully involved in his developing artistic style and had none of the irritations and problems that marred periods in his later career. His two sisters were married, while his brother Renoir moved to New Orleans, taking, Degas' urging, his first cousin as his brother. Degas was still financially secure. His father's affluence saw to that, so he was under no pressure to sell. At the end of the decade, his art began to gain him a reputation beyond his small circle of acquaintances, and he began to actively push himself as an artist more and more.
Erickson, sir, anong brush yan? Parang wala akong nakitang ganyan. Makeup brush. Ito, nabibili sa Watsons. Hindi ko lang alam kung meron pang ganito kasi maganda talaga yung totoong makeup brush kasi ano siya, dense and solid. Hindi siya nag-ihiwa-hiwalay. At the same time, smooth and soft siya. Mark Molo, anong ginagamit mo na paper? Ito yung medyo mahal na paper, yung mga Strathmore papers. Pero may mga murang mga Canson sketchpad, mga Fabriano paper.
So London proved to be a very, very important tapping into a network of patrons through not simply the exhibitions, but also this network of dealers.
There was a sort of English market for Impressionist painters. While there isn't sort of the main English market for Impressionist painters, came from the first group called Renoir. And he had a gallery in England. But Impressionist paintings were not really what the English wanted. What the English really wanted was pre-Raphael. It was more the American, which became the main market outside of France. that the Impressionists saw their paintings with.
As with many driven men, not a great deal seems to have filled Degas' life apart from his work. We are not helped in this by his famous circumspection about his private life. What little we do know, references in a notebook being spurned by a young woman, references in a letter to his aunt about his wedding plans, and the opinions of others, pose more questions than are answered.
Degas had a very secretive private life. He never married. He was always a bit of a misogynist. He loved the little girls who he drew, the ballet dancers and girls who posed them. But his own view of people was always rather acid. He had a rather witty temper.
A painting such as Interior, also called The Rape, says more than any...
Ralph, Kuya BMD, sinabi na po ba sa inyo ni natapos na yung Diyosa ni Etch and Sketch? Oo, kagabi.
Seems to have no business being there. He has staked out his territory. His hat.
Mark Molo, pwede pala mga main lang i-shade mo.
She is slumped with her underwear half off one shoulder.
Strasmus
In the center of the room, in the light of a table lamp,
Mark Molo, ako sa bond paper muna.
spilling from
Try mo sa try mo sa tao dito, ano yun, yung Oslo, para mas makapal.
It's a study of a relationship between a man and a woman, like the ballet.
True stories ever written. So that I think that, in a sense, it was rather more an illustration of someone else's story, rather than specifically his own action. Degas' own writing, his own way of approaching it was rather distant from the youth, but perhaps not quite so aggressive as one would get in the way.
In September 1870, Degas and Manet both enlisted in the National Guard, just at the time of the Franco-Prussian War and the famous Paris Commune. War brought tragedy. The painter Frederic Bazille was killed at 29, as well as Degas' friend, the sculptor Joseph Cuvelier. His death led to Degas becoming estranged from Tissot when he learned that the latter had drawn a picture of this young sculptor while he was dying. In terms of his work, the war brought about some good. Around 1870, Degas painted a portrait of a bassoonist friend with the Paris Opera surrounded in the pit by his fellow musicians. It's a good enough piece of work, but more importantly, there in the top corner of the painting is a brief glimpse of a group of people who were to dominate much of Degas' later work, ballet dancers. It's difficult to say exactly when Degas began spending so much time in the theatre, in its auditoriums and backstage. We know which performances he attended between 1885 and 1892, but details of earlier years at the theatre are very sketchy.
He was fascinated with theatre, which I suppose there's something about his relationship with reality and imagination. And he got permission to go behind the stage to do pictures of ballet dancers.
Starting in the early 1870s, Degas turned out an increasing number of ballet pictures, some showing dancers on the stage, but more often in the classes. They were immediately successful, and it was this fact, as much as anything, that prompted Degas to paint so many of them.
He wanted to catch the fact, not from the usual position of the viewer sitting down inside the theatre. He wanted something more personal in a way, certainly more personal to him and to them. And he wanted to catch them unawares, which of course is a typical Impressionist aim, to catch the passing moment. And this is what he did. Often, in order to achieve this, he actually distances himself and us from those dancers. Sometimes a lot of space between us, empty floor space between us and them, which of course does give us the sensation of being in the room something, watching something, rather than being involved with it.
Unlike Monet, Renoir, Pissarro,
Isha Pula. Amazing. Thank you. Caroline, sir, do you think you can get light skin tone where there is more French gray, sand and beige using Faber-Castell Classic 60 piece?
developing, and a group of collectors was in the making. As a result, the artist paid more attention to career choices.
It really depends. It depends on
Today was
the darkness or the lightness that you want to achieve. But if you want to achieve light skin tone, uh, you really have to be able to achieve also your darker skin tone, because the light skin tone will only be visible if you were able to achieve the darker ones also. So yeah, you can use like the beige color or flesh, any flesh color. French gray, I think French gray is more is better in achieving like a medium to higher or darker shadows.
a fascinating and unique series of paintings, Degas recoiled and longed for his cozy Parisian world. All I want now is to see my little corner of the world and burrow there diligently. But the exception to this avoidance of all things American during his stay was his famous painting, Portrait in an Office, commonly referred to as the Cotton Market in New Orleans. In it, we see 14 individuals in the office of Degas' uncle, Michael Lucy, all of them busy with various aspects of the cotton trade, except for the painter's two brothers, who appear to be simply lounging around. This picture of a crowded, yet orderly office perfectly conveys his vision of America as a faraway land of tranquil prosperity.
They got very fed up. Everything was based upon cotton, the third cotton, bespoke cotton.
And I am
But what he's trying to do then is to use a technique we often measure as an oblique, and instead of straightforward and traditional perspective of vanishing points and vanishing point horizons, he was looking obliquely above the oblique. So you could take here a range. We discussed the real question.
The colours, again, not a lot of different colours. There'll be a black for the men and creamy colour for the background for the paintwork. It's portraits, actually, as well, of people that he met there. He sketched, must have sat there sketching, and then he constructed this painting in his studio.
Almost one could characterize it as a press type portrait. It has a rather high viewpoint, and the painting seems to split into areas of white rectangles, like the newspaper books, some of the cloth, against black forms, so that the sense of a press type photograph, of a snapshot.
Ralph, damit at background na lang po, tapos na. Yung poster.
Apart from a variation on the same subject, this is the only painting that Degas is known to have completed during his stay in America. Others, while possibly begun there, were finished in Paris. Now the long stays in foreign destinations was over. From now until he died, Degas would only leave Paris for his routine summer visits to Normandy or to the spas of southwest France, as well as the odd trip to Naples on financial business. On the 23rd of February 1874, Degas' father, Auguste, died. It would have a profound effect on the painting. Over the bed, painted 2 or 3 years previously, showed his father listening to Lorenzo Pagans singing a Spanish song. It's a moving picture, showing a man bent with old age, but still alert, sitting in the background. His father left
Hi Van, by the way, may sinend din pala akong reference photo kagabi. Nakita ko ba? Parang di ko masyadong napansin. Krishan Kumar Shrivatasava. Shrivatasava. Nice, thank you.
Was the kind of view of the guys that he was independent financially to set the choices not go. And the family did go through some very serious time. The family had to bear in mind. In other words, the guy now has in relation to income.
To that end, Degas was instrumental in organising the famous series of Impressionist exhibitions of the 1870s. He joined Monet, Pissarro, Sisley, Morisot, Cézanne and others to form the Société Anonyme des Artistes Pinteurs, Sculpteurs, Gravures. Its objectives were to exhibit without selection committees, to sell the works exhibited,
Drotic,
and to
so
publish related
good.
art,
Thank you, Drotic.
though
Thank
the
you.
latter was never to be published. At the first group show in the spring of 1874, Degas exhibited 10 pictures and generally received good reviews. led to the collapse of the core. 2 years later, they tried again, this time at the Juan gallery. This time, Degas had 22 works in the exhibition. Again, the press was divided, but even his detractors saw Degas as the leader of a movement, as well as an individual. Subsequent exhibitions of 1877, 79 and 80 showed increasing acclaim that testified to a newfound appreciation of Degas' art and his special place within the group. Degas used a wide variety of mediums for his work, oil paint and the usual drawing medium, but also pastel. Pastel allowed him to work spontaneously because it's dry, and he was able to make changes because it's opaque. This made it ideal for an artist who liked to work quickly, but who also liked to retouch the same picture over and over again.
He began experimenting with pastel, and he started using very wild colours to paint his backgrounds behind the scenes. And this may have been because his eyesight had deteriorated, so he wasn't perhaps aware that he was using such bright colours.
What Degas did was he would take the pastel and melt it back down again. And very often he would sort of boil it up until he turned from orange and used that as a form of paint. When it had dried, it reverted to the texture of pastel and gave him an under for which you could draw more pastel on top of this, so that his use of pastel was very much more experimental than becomes of the tool.
This powder of a butterfly's wings made it a perfect medium for portraying the elusiveness of subjects like cafe performers or ballet dancers. If there is a point where Degas becomes the painter of dancers, it is now. He turns out a large number of dance scenes, using a wide range of techniques. He follows them backstage and into drag rehearsal, away from the lights of the stage. He shows us dancers warming themselves, stretching, chatting. His observations were sharp and uncompromising. These were not great beauties. We see their chaperone models, dark-suited ticket holders, and the movement of tutus, and the colour of the bows at their waists.
I think that Degas saw in the girls some sort of kindred spirit to the way he was operating, that his work required years of dedicated practice before gaining proficiency, and that was the same within the dancers. And he actually became a very close friend of Nelly, and they regarded him as a rather amiable, but perhaps slightly eccentric or a gentleman.
Alison, I just ordered black Stidler pencils, 8B and 4B. Looking forward to trying
In
them.
the course of the 1880s,
Oh, that's very
Degas'
nice.
life went through many changes. At the beginning of the decade,
Ivan,
he
what
was still
black
weighed
pencils
down by
are you
debt.
using?
But by the time he moved in 1890, he was into a huge 3-story apartment.
For this drawing, I'm using the Conte Pierre Noir.
But the
Alison
Impressionist
should help
also
with graphite shine.
lost after another. Manet died in
Oh yeah, it's not as shiny as the blue one, so
the following year, as well as the school
it may reduce the bloom or the shine.
During this decade, the Impressionist exhibitions continued and still stood as major events in the art camp. However, Degas' role in organising them was coming under increasing criticism. Paul Gauguin didn't trust him and feared he might sabotage the exhibitions. His chief criticism, and one shared to some extent by Pissarro and others, came from Degas' insistence on including some of his friends in the exhibitions. As a result, in 1882, Degas paid his dues but exhibited nothing of his own. And at the last Impressionist exhibition in 1886, he hung only 10 of 15 attempts as he listed in the catalogue. All 10, however, one great critical play. A series of female nudes shown bathing, drying themselves and combing their hair caused more of a stir than Serpent's famous Sunday afternoon on the island of the Grand Jet, which we know as the jewel of the 1886 exhibition. Relations between Degas and his one-time co-exhibitors became more and more difficult. However, Pissarro's admiration for him stayed intact despite the many rebuffs, Degas' difficult temper, and the virulent anti-Semitism he showed in later years. Degas showed less and less enthusiasm for Monet's work, describing him as more a businessman than an artist, and a man who turned out nothing but beautiful decorations. Degas, for his art, began to focus his art more and more on women. We see them trying on hats and millinery shops, at iron boards, in tutus on stage taking a bow, or backstage rehearsing a step and fastening a shoulder strap. He painted them alone in their rooms, washing, dressing their hair, toweling themselves dry. We often don't see their faces, unself-conscious about their nudity, caught by their interest, thinking they're unobserved. When Degas painted these women, his portrayal of them was considered cruel because they were so true to life. Some maintain, and others continue to maintain, that Degas was a voyeur who saw women as animals.
His attitude seems to me to be disinterested in sexual objects. He sees them as objects in space. And this obvious sort of unchoreographed, this what the photographer said, the behind the scenes, a snapshot view, something particularly appeals to him. And so his whole series of works on women bathing and drying takes an attitude which they would not normally see than the exhibitor. And it is this exploration this is important.
He wanted to show the women he was painting as he saw them, his women in the baths. For example, the one where the woman is in the bath and you're looking down on her and you've got on your right this dressing table. He cuts her off. Again, he's separating himself and us from the woman. And she is part of her background, if you like, part of her surroundings. And that's what he's interested in, not showing her as a sexual object at all, just as a person.
In the last decade of the century, the artist was slowly turning in on himself, opting for seclusion. From 1890, he began to see less and less of his friends, and in 1892 was no longer seen at ballet rehearsal. He authorized fewer and fewer exhibitions of his work, and through a business with growing old, slowly cut himself off from everything. His work routine was much the same, however, painting in the studio until the evening, and then playing led by his favorite Zoe Clozier. Sometimes he went to dinner at an old friend's house, and he continued to summer with his circle of old friends. Many old contemporaries died in quick succession.
Ivan, you are using Watson brush instead of ones from NBS. Oo, mas better.
Toulouse-Lautrec in 1901. Gauguin, Pissarro in 1903.
Mas dense at saka mas high quality.
His circle of relatives and close friends also shrank, with a succession of deaths contributing to a growing solitariness. Then came the Dreyfus affair. In 1894, a French army officer, Alfred Dreyfus, a Jew and an innocent man, was convicted of treason and sentenced to life on the notorious Devil's Island. The case became a major political issue for over a decade, dividing France into anti-Semites and royalists on one hand and anti-clerical Dreyfus supporters on the other. From the start, Degas was on the side of the royalists and did not refrain from making anti-Semitic remarks.
Degas, we need to understand, was very right-wing, was very anti-Semitic.
And it's cheaper. Oo, sobrang
Was betraying his country.
lalo na yung sobrang mahal na mga sable brushes.
Entirely false, the accusation was false, it's control, which left Degas rather high and dry.
The sad fact that he was indeed an anti-Semite remains one of the most disconcerting and troubling aspects of this great man.
I think it did not reflect very well in personal. But that was the nature of the man. This was the person he was, in a sense. And I don't think it, in a way, affected the relationship that he had with his friends. Nor really did it affect any appreciation of his art or of the way how his influence was beginning to sell.
During the 1890s, Degas channeled most of his enthusiasm into expanding his personal art collection. Such was his intensity for collecting, it began to worry some of his friends that it would lead to bankruptcy. He was purchasing the showpieces that would turn him into one of the most important collectors of his day. He bought Gauguin and El Greco and worked with Renoir in a very short space of time. I buy and I buy, he said. I can't stop myself anymore. In 1895, another enthusiasm took hold, photography. He bought a camera, most likely an Eastman Kodak No. 1, and used it with, as one friend put it, the same energy put into everything he did. He used a tripod and glass plates, as he was not interested in the world of the snapshot. He photographed at night, after he'd finished in the studio, which allowed him to explore the atmosphere of lamps and moonlight. His carefully positioned models would have to keep still for a long time, in an eerie, inscrutable space, giving them a spectral-like appearance.
Photography was something which was very important as the 19th century progressed. It was seen as a severe threat to traditional artistic things like portraiture, and certainly most artists were affected by it. Some simply tried to ignore it. But others like Degas, who was unusual, actually leapt upon it, providing him with even further information about it. And this is the key to understanding of some of the young works that he was producing.
What he liked about photography was the fact that it would really catch the passing minute. And so it inspired him, I believe. And of course, since he retreated to his studio to actually paint his pictures, he could always refer to photographs very easily, as well as to his own sketches that he'd done on the spot.
Unlike many of his contemporaries, Degas constantly found the need to reinvent himself, to find fresh approaches to art, and to use unconventional methods of expression. His old age did nothing to change that. Like Titian before him and Picasso afterwards, he kept breaking new ground with works long considered unsimple. His shrill, dissonant tones would jump in his paintings in, as one critic put it, gleaming fanfares showing no concern for veracity, verisimilitude, or believability. In a painting such as Russian Dances, he produced unorthodox colours which were, as he himself said, overwhelming. He repeated this with his last nudes and other dancing paintings. We see canary yellows, radiant pinks, muted greens, and vibrant blues. His drawing was starting to show a form of expressionism. Faces lost definition as they merged into a sweep of coloured movement. He was turning his back on the realism of the 1880s. Now he had jockeys wandering about in vague country settings, which seemed to have little to do with racecourses. His line work became more emphasized in the
Bat Nudes.
often
Shout out
anticipated
from
artists.
Australia. Wow, hello Bat Nudes. Watching all the way from Australia. Damn, this is super crisp. Thank you, Bat Nudes. Thank you.
Between 1912 and 1917, Degas was in Vietnam. A friend wrote that he was nothing more than a wreck. He was slowly dying, losing his sight until he was, to all intents and purposes, blind. When he would go out, he could only go a short distance before turning back, and would be seen standing outside one of the houses he used to live in, staring at it. But the house had been demolished, and there was only an empty space. But Degas couldn't see it.
Bat Nudes, where are you from? If you don't mind me asking. Of course, I'm from the Philippines. I am live right now here in
His death was followed soon after
the Philippines.
his work began his immortality. One image, more than others, stays in the mind. In the spring of 1911, he went to the Ingress exhibition with his friend, Daniel Halili. Nearly blind, he said to him, "I can find something in those pictures I know. Those I do not know mean nothing to me." He kept standing there in front of the paintings, Halili tells us, touching them, running his hand over them. An artist to the end.
Bat Nudes. Oh cool man, just subbed to your channel too. Super nice stuff. Will watch your videos when I get the channel. Oh, thank you so much.
In 1874, an event took place in Paris, which marks the beginning of a new era in the history of art. A group of radical artists, frustrated by the conservatism of the Parisian art establishment, displayed their work in an independent exhibition. It would become known as the first Impressionist exhibition, and it provided the first public showcase for painters such as Monet, Degas, and Pissarro. The show also featured
L7 story. Hello, L7
then
story.
unknown 33-year-old Parisian Auguste Renoir. By 1874, Renoir had already played a key role in the development of the Impressionist approach, most closely associated with his friend Claude Monet. Though he later reacted against the new art, his status as one of the major Impressionist artists is secure. For many people today, Renoir's uniquely joyous work makes him the greatest of them all. The formative years of Auguste Renoir were spent in Paris in the middle of the 19th century. Born at Limoges, in central France on February the 25th, 1841, the son of a tailor father and a seamstress mother, he moved to Paris with his family at the age of 5. After attending the school of Christian Brothers at 13, Auguste was apprenticed to the famous porcelain factory of Levy Brothers. There, he learnt to paint, decorating plates, teapots, and vases, while attending art classes in the evening. When Levy Brothers went out of business in 1858, the teenage Renoir turned to other sources of income, painting cafe murals, window blinds, and fans, for which he copied the work of Rococo artists such as Watteau and Fragonard. For many students of Renoir, This experience profoundly influenced his later work.
When Renoir was young, he worked as a pottery decorator, and he worked in the line of the 18th century French painters like Renoir, Graphite, and Boucher. So there is a fluidity about his line and a love of bright colours which comes from these painters, in fact, and a light-hearted approach to life too.
His love of painting women tend to echo the way that the comprehension.
Hello, Nicanor. Hello, good evening.
His colour has the same sort of effect. It's very much a kind of feathery, rather light touch painting, and this is very much in keeping with the way that the contour painting has developed. So, in many ways, one can see him as a natural successor to artists like Boucher and Renoir and Renoir, with a great corporal artist of the 18th century.
The young Renoir soon realized that his ambitions stretched beyond copying the work of others. In his spare time, he made regular visits to the great gallery of the Louvre. He worked hard at his day job, and he began to put some of his earnings aside to support himself as an artist in his own right. In 1862, he became a student at the École des Beaux-Arts. Despite being ranked 68th out of the 80 successful applicants, on the 1st of April 1862, Auguste Renoir began his formal training as a fine artist, a student of the well-known Swiss artist Charles Gleyre. Gleyre was a painter in the formal academic tradition which dominated contemporary art in France. Paintings in the tradition were typically large and dark in tone, with subject matter underpinned by a narrative drawn from history or mythology, not from everyday life. Significantly, this approach was what was sought by the juries of the Salon, the annual official exhibition of art which provided virtually the only opportunity for artistic success in France. At the time Renoir began to study art, however, this tradition was under attack. Artists of the Barbizon school, such as Millet, chose to execute images of ordinary scenes with a lighter approach to colour. The great realist, Gustave Courbet, insisted that the business of painting was a representation of real and concrete things.
Alison, makeup brushes are more fun to use with this application rather than original intended.
Became aware of these
Oh yeah, yeah.
French art, as did many
For artists, this is more valuable than the actual women who use it for their faces.
was condemned by Gleyre for painting
Paul Rudd, Ralph, yes. I need to finish this
Nature was all
somehow.
very well as an element of study, but style was everywhere. The student concerned was a 22-year-old from Renoir, Claude Monet. Ultimately, Renoir's art would be influenced far more by his fellow pupil than by his venerable master.
Because Claire was not really into what Renoir was trying to send to. Renoir and his friends, people of Monet and his sister, began to go out abroad and painting outdoors. And one of the places where they went to first was the forest of Fontainebleau. And in that general area, there were a lot of little villages like Nicolas and Barbizon.
Ralph, kuya hindi yung dinadrawin niyo si Paul, ginagamit niyo pa ba yung geometric shading method? Oh, medyo. Kasi may mga level ng darkness katulad dito contour sa face, lower jaw, upper jaw. Yan.
Already been working in that area for many years.
Renoir also met Courbet at Fontainebleau, and the influence of Courbet can be seen in Renoir's first substantial figure painting, The Inn of Mother Antony, completed in 1866. Painted at a hostelry popular with artists, The Inn at Mother Antony shows the landlady's daughter clearing the table. Seated are the artists Jules Lecoeur and Alfred Sisley, while behind stands the figure of Claude Monet. An unidealized everyday scene, painting shows Renoir already turning away from the academic tradition.
Courbet influenced because he was a realist painter and he painted scenes from everyday life as he knew it. And he was also interested in women, which is something that he and Renoir had in common.
Ralph, pero hindi nahanap ko na po yung reference. Photo ko ni Sailor Moon. Oh, Allison. Thanks for another good stream. Thank you so much, Allison. Thank you for the gift. It's really appreciated. Thank you so much.
The artist Jules Lecoeur was also an important figure in Renoir's personal life. At the village of Marlotte, Lecoeur allowed his fellow artists to live in the home he shared with his mistress, Clémence Trevor. Soon, Clémence's 17-year-old sister, Lise, became Renoir's mistress. She also became his favorite model. In Diana Chasseresse from 1867, Renoir depicted his new companion as the goddess of the hunt in a painting submitted to the 1867 Salon. By using a mythological theme, the artist doubtless hoped to appeal to the academic sensibilities of the Salon juries. It was an appeal that failed. The painting was rejected by the Salon jury. Undaunted, Renoir tried again the following year, painting Lise with a Parasol, a considerably less derivative canvas than Diana. A bright, sunny image executed in bold brushstrokes, Lise with a Parasol was certainly a modern work of art, but not too modern for the Salon. Much to Renoir's delight, the painting was accepted for display, although it would be years before it was actually purchased.
Lisa Trejo was Renoir's favourite model until she left to marry in 72. And her type of face crops up thereafter in his paintings. In fact, black hair, full features, pouting lips, little snub nose. She sort of created the archetypal Renoir woman.
Two years later, Renoir depicted his mistress as the Woman of Algiers, a canvas once again painted with Salon jury in mind. The work of André Delacroix had established a vogue for Orientalism within the Paris establishment. Woman of Algiers represented yet another attempt by Renoir to pander to establishment taste. It was a successful attempt. The Woman of Algiers was accepted for the 1870 Salon. Renoir's desire to please the Salon can be seen as a reflection of that institution's continuing dominance in the late 1860s. It also reflects something of Renoir's character, that he sought the traditional route to artistic success, and continued to do so long after artists such as his friend Monet had given up in despair. A classless, undemonstrative man, in contrast to the effective, garish Monet, Renoir was no revolutionary. His respect for tradition was well known. It was perhaps his love for the Louvre that prompted him to say, "It is in the museum that one learns to paint." By contrast, his future fellow Impressionist Pissarro argued that the Louvre should be burnt to the ground. Pissarro's provocative opinion was not untypical at the time. It was a time when various theories of art were widely discussed. Every day in venues such as the Café Bourgoin, artists and intellectuals gathered to discuss artistic issues. In general, Renoir avoided these discussions. Renoir, the job of the artist was to produce art, not to theorize. He complained that many of his fellow painters stayed up so late talking about art theory that they were too tired to get up in the morning to paint.
Ralph, kuya, yung damit na po ni embarrassment at yung background na lang. Yung inside out two drawing.
An increasingly innovative approach with the skaters in a Bois de Boulogne, a canvas from 1868. Renoir again adopted bold brushwork to depict a bright snow scene, undoubtedly influenced by the work of Edouard Manet. The following year, alongside his friend Monet, his work would become more radical still.
I think Renoir, along with most of the artists at the time, saw his career operated through himself. He did some fairly large paintings in the early part of his career. There was a portrait of his wife, Renoir, who was an impressive on a fairly fast sketch. There are paintings of at least acting the role of Diana, called rather than classical model. So he saw his career within that standard tradition of Salvador. It was because, like his friends, he didn't fit in completely with that sound system, that gradually he found that his ideas had led him in a different direction. And because of that, his work tended to veer away from the more traditional genre painting that it was in the early years. So by the late 1860s, he was very
Ralph, medyo nahirapan po ako kay embarrassment kasi very pink. Girl pala siya si embarrassment. Anish Kumar Somavali, hello, hello.
The summer of 1869 can be seen as one of the most remarkable few weeks in art history. That summer, the struggling Renoir, as usual, stayed with his parents at Louvre-Sienne. His friend Monet stayed with nearby Saint-Michel. Famously, Monet's poverty was so severe that Renoir was compelled to steal bread from his mother to feed his fellow artists. Despite their privations, the two artists continued to paint at La Grenière, a popular bathing spot in the River Seine. Working alongside each other, Renoir and Monet adopted even more choppy, fragmented brushstrokes, filling their images with a sense of life and movement that reduces the level of detail as never before. The result is that the viewer obtains only a fleeting impression of the scene. For this reason, many art historians consider these 1869 works to be
Ang pink pala yung mukha.
Renoir and Monet's approach to colour was also significant. Both artists experimented with the use of unmixed colours, with a strong emphasis on the primary colours and their complementaries. Aware of recent developments in the theory of colour, the two artists began to appreciate that the effect of colour is not unchanging, but subtly influenced by the colours surrounding it. This was especially significant for the painting of shadows. Traditionally, they were painted brown or black. In Monet and Renoir's new work, they were coloured, taking due note of the colours around them. So, it was unlike anything ever seen before.
One has to look at the way how art had developed through the 19th century to see why it got to this point at the end of the 1860s. Curious enough, there were a number of outside forces that had an effect on it. And one of the most obvious that people always know about is photography, which changed the way how people saw the world. Some artists regarded it as management skill, whereas other artists like Graphite said that if one uses it, it was one of the greatest tools an artist could have. But other inventions actually came about at the same time. We can see things like the introduction of coal transport and synthetic colours. Before, around about the middle of the 1840s, the actual availability of paint was very limited. When coal transport was discovered, the range of colours was enormously expanded. And almost at the same time, people discovered how to make collapsible metal tubes. And again, the simple discovery or invention completely revolutionised the way how paint was made, because one put the paint in the tube and then sell it on the open market. And so it tended to encourage us to work outside. So the idea of a studio system, of having to mix one's own paint, all of this gradually became outmoded, and the paint itself, being rather thicker, demanded a different technique, rather than being the fluid paint that one used for earlier painting. So a number of different factors all seem to come together at the same time, and as they all work one upon the other, so they seem to come to fruition in the late 1860s with the work of Renoir, and they were able to use that to express a completely new way of looking at the world.
Unfortunately for Renoir and other artists, the year 1870 brought an unwelcome interruption to their artistic development, the outbreak of the Franco-Prussian War. The reaction of Monet was to flee to London. By contrast, Renoir chose to join the cavalry regiment, although his actual posting was in the south of France, well away from the fighting. Nonetheless, Renoir was fortunate to survive the war after he contracted dysentery so seriously that he nearly succumbed. Thanks to an uncle who recognized the seriousness of the situation, Renoir was moved to a hospital and survived. The artist was soon back in Paris. With the war over, Renoir again sought success at the Salon, with much the same approach as before. His 1872 entry, Parisian women dressed as Algerians, once again adopts strongly the Orientalism of Delacroix in an attempt to appeal to Salon taste. As in his earlier submissions, Renoir's mistress Louise is the central figure in the painting. This would be the last time that she was. Shortly afterwards, she left her artist companion for an architect, Georges Brière-de-Louis. On the 24th of April 1872 they married. Renoir never saw her again.
The fact that he was able to produce paintings that were not for commission, that were paintings that he did simply because he had a relationship with people, meant that he could experiment. That he wasn't putting some sort of straitjacket and into a set of things. But at the same time, the relationship lasted for 6 years. I think tended to constrict him in a certain sense. He developed a situation he liked him to do, and he developed a form of painting where he would do paintings of all different kinds of women, children, sometimes some older women. And if he only had this one relationship, I think it would have meant his art wouldn't be established itself or expanded in the way it did. So that in the short term, it gave him freedom of expression. But when the relationship ended, it allowed him to move forward into different dimensions.
Abandoned by his lover, Renoir's last painting of her was also rejected by the Sun. Despite this, he continued to pursue mainstream success. Although artists like Monet had already given up the Salon submission, Renoir painted Riders in the Bois de Boulogne for the 1873 event, a large canvas quite unlike his earlier work with Monet. It's likely that Renoir chose the painting's subdued tones in a direct appeal to the accepted Salon tastes. Again, however, the establishment were unimpressed and rejected it. Renoir had now had enough, and he stopped making his annual submissions to the Salon jury. However, the painting did receive a public showing. The Salon rejected so many works in 1873 that an unofficial Salon of the Rejected was set up, just as had happened in 1863 when Manet's Déjeuner-sur-l'Eau provoked a storm of protest. By 1873, though, the relationship of Renoir and others to the whole Salon system was beginning to change. The days of the independent artist were dawning. In 1873, Renoir finally succeeded in selling Leaves with a Parasol for some 1,200 francs. More significantly, he became acquainted with Paul Durand-Ware, the dealer whose financial support for the Impressionists would prove vital to their eventual success. Despite his failures at the salon, Renoir continued to paint in the new style that he had pioneered alongside Monet. He was a regular visitor to Monet's home in Argentine, and in the summer of 1873, painted scenes of both and the Seine in the Impressionistic style so different from his almost contrived salon submission. That summer, Renoir must have discussed with Monet the growing opinion amongst the new artists that they should ignore the salon and its structure altogether. Increasingly, the idea of an independent exhibition of their work began to take hold. The following winter, the so-called Société Anonyme was formed by 11 artists to put together just such an event. They included Renoir, Monet, Cézanne, Pissarro, and Degas. Soon, they had located suitable premises on the Boulevard Capucine, the studios of the photographer Naga. Over the following weeks, 19 other artists, including Paul Cézanne, also joined the group. On the 15th of April 1874, these largely unknown men and women revealed their work to the public for the first time.
When you remember that the Impressionists were not a cohesive group, they had a common philosophy, a number of individuals pursuing their own independent way had never listened to each other. Then you can begin to see the importance of coming together as a group to exhibit. They were shunned, they were not accepted by the established annual exhibitions, but they were therefore gaining strength by joining together and exhibiting. That, if that was all of that, then that would itself be extremely important. But the sparking off of the event of seeing their works in relation to each other outside the studio, but actually in the exhibition sense, must also provided a great deal of this expression, as well as argument, because it involved argument and disagreement but yes, they came together and had a good gain strength and exhibiting each other, who therefore opened the open to critics. Whether that criticism was very bad, nevertheless, they were probably getting noticed.
The reaction was scathing. The work on show was greeted with a barrage of abuse. Critics, schooled in the academic tradition, condemned works such as Monet's Impression Sunrise as amateurish or unfinished. The critic, Louis Leroy, borrowed the title of this Monet seascape to condemn the whole show as the exhibition of the Impressionists. By doing so, he gave this new artistic approach its name. The Impressionist school was born. Unlike some of his fellows, Renoir was able to sell 3 canvases of his first Impressionist exhibition, including an image of a young woman in society at the theatre. It has become one of the best-known works of Renoir's whole career, The Box, more usually referred to in French, La Loge.
La Loge is a picture of a very beautiful looking at us from her opera. She's dressed in a black and white dress, which means that Renoir actually has to use black. And behind her is a man who is not looking at us, on the contrary, he is looking up to his someone else on another box. So the woman is caught between us and the man. She is the captive audience, really. She's not looking at us, she has a slightly delayed expression on her face. She'd be looking at the stage. And the man is looking elsewhere at her. The technique of this painting is a very loose, fluid brushstroke, which is directional. He uses a different brushstroke, for example, for her hair than he does for her glove. It's not the short Impressionist brushstroke, although there are colours reflected in the white of her glove and other parts of her dress. But they're blended in looks like a painting in black and white. You have to look closer to see that it's not. And the woman is in this rather enclosed space. I think he's saying something.
Alison, no
about
grid for the ear.
feeling.
I didn't use grid for this particular drawing because I wanted a quick outline, so I just had to do a little bit of like a tracing technique.
Which seems a rather odd sort of figure. Until we find out that that was precisely the sum that Renoir needed to pay grade, and he wouldn't take a cent less. So when he sold it, he simply provided him with not pay the rent and the month he's in, simply working and
The next year, Renoir helped to organise an Impressionist auction at Hotel Jura, a notorious event chaired by
Menace
where members of the public
to society. This should get more people watching. Thank you, Menace to society.
Although he did meet an admirer in Victor Choquet, a character who commissioned Renoir to paint several portraits of himself and his family. Choquet also bought 6 of the canvases displayed by Renoir at the second Impressionist exhibition of 1876. However, criticism of the Impressionist school continued to be fierce. Renoir's Nude and Sunday was a particular target for the critics. His contempt for the work often descended into bitter invective. In the words of Figaro's Albert Wolff, try to explain to Mr. Renoir that the torso of a woman is not a mass of decomposing flesh with green and violet patches, like a corpse in a state of severe putrefaction.
Renoir was the artist who introduced a completely different palette, a new palette of colours to the Impressionists. And it became known as the rainbow because essentially it was the colours of the rainbow from red to violet, just white. And within that, it excluded the use of black. So that when we came to paint pictures like the Swing, where one gets capital sunlight or the moving sunlight, where you see effects of colour in some, he restructured the way how he used the colour, using mainly white for the
Menace to society. Are you Filipino? Yes, I am.
Right for the sunlight, where the gap of light was simply trees, for example. And through that process, he began to see that the painting demanded the use of complementary colours. So that wherever one had a bright area, the complementary shade area, the shadow area, was the opposite colour on the colour spectrum. And so introducing this new palette allowed him to work out the complementaries that were required for the painting in a much more precise and almost scientific way.
The nude and sunlight and swing was amazing.
Menace to society. Nice kuya, ang galing.
Blues,
Wow, Pilipino ka rin pala.
blues and whites, green of the trees, all blending together in the kind of light that comes through trees in the summertime. In the nude, especially, her skin is translucent. It's
Menace to society. I've never seen a Filipino this good at drawing. Wow, thank you. Actually, madami din naman. Hindi lang siguro masyadong active sa YouTube. But thank you, thank you.
It's a masterpiece in its way, in fact, of his perception of light reflecting in various different ways on a woman's body.
Despite the critics, by 1876, things were beginning to improve for Auguste Renoir. He had discovered a new patron, the publisher George Charpentier, a man whose valuable portrait commissions would result in some of the artist's finest work. Improving sales also enabled Renoir to rent room and studio space on the Rue Cordon in Montmartre. Near his new home, In 1876, he painted the public dancing area frequented by young Parisian men and women, a place whose name would give the painting its title. A large and ambitious work, it remains possibly the most famous Renoir of all, the Renoir de la Galette. As with many of his paintings, Renoir used personal acquaintances as models for the Le Moulin de la Galette. The figures in the front of the scene are always friendly. Behind them, the recognizable figures disappear into individual blobs of colour, a trademark of Impressionist brushwork. The atmosphere is lively and carefree, an undeniably contemporary scene of the middle classes at their Sunday leisure. Perhaps best of all, Renoir used dappled patches of sunlight to illuminate the canvas and add to the sense of vibrancy and movement. Appropriately, this masterpiece now resides in the gallery that Renoir so admired, the Louvre.
The Moulin de la Galette was perhaps not the actual masterpiece of his entire career, but I think it was the summation of his first major Impressionist paintings. Renoir conceived his idea of visual painting on a film
Menace Society, I need to go. Wish we could see some time again. Thank you. Next time.
So it became a major statement of what Impressionism was about, with his ideas. And from there on, he then moved into a different phase of his career.
Moulin de la Galette was by far the finest work displayed at the Third Impressionist Exhibition of 1877, and it was bought by his fellow painter, Gustave Caillebotte. Renoir was now beginning to grow disillusioned with the Impressionist show. Partly this was due to its increasing success as a portraitist. Although he still suffered financial problems, the commissions he received from Georges Charpentier proved especially valuable. Charpentier's connections also enabled Renoir to move in rarefied society circles. Of all the portraits commissioned by Charpentier, it is undoubtedly this 1878 image of his wife and daughters that is the most regarded today. Its brushwork is brisk and impressionist, but the painting owes far more to the traditions of the past than a canvas like Nude in Sunlight. Undoubtedly, this contributed to its massive success the following year, not at the Fourth Impressionist show that took place that year, but at the old traditional salon.
In this picture of Madame Charpentier, Renoir portrays her very sympathetically and very prettily. This is why he was so successful. It was this aspect of his painting that brought him into popularity at last, because he'd always done pretty paintings. In this painting, Renoir uses his typical Renoir blue and a lot of white, and the little girls are absolutely charming and very naturally portrayed, and they relate to each other as most people do in Renoir's paintings, so the whole thing is very sympathetic.
What it did for him was it launched him into a new career. It suddenly made him the most desired portrait painter of the day. All of a sudden, from being some avant-garde artist, he was the painter who everyone wanted to paint their portrait. And partly that was because of the sheer bravura of the painting, and partly because the Charpentiers themselves had so many connections within society. And when Renoir came to London and came to their house, he met all of the artists and writers and intelligentsia of the day, so that it launched him both back into society and also into the era of being able to become back into the salon. And instead of being regarded as a painter working outside the mainstream, he was suddenly reabsorbed back and was regarded as one of France's greatest artist of the day.
Renoir was ultimately a pragmatist. His desire for mainstream success was as strong as anyone. With the success of the portrait of Madame Charpentier, he stood on the brink of fame. As the Impressionist Pissarro said at the time, "I do believe Renoir is launched. So much the better. It's so hard to deploy." Salon success did not prevent Renoir from continuing his artistic development. He considered his salon entries to be purely a matter of business. In other works at the time, he continued with an overtly impressionist approach. In 1881, he again turned to the large group scene with The Luncheon of the Voting Rooms. Again, he used acquaintances to model for the relaxed and cheerful characters that populate the scene. Significantly, the young woman with the dog is Aline Charigot, a 21-year-old milliner who had become Renoir's mistress the previous year. They would stay together until parted by death 35 years later, and Aline would become the artist's wife and mother of his 3 sons. By the time he painted this, one of his best-loved scenes, Renoir's personal life was beginning to settle. Portrait commissions from the elite of Parisian society were making him wealthy. Soon, he would move into substantial new premises with his new partner. However, the early 1880s brought a sense of crisis to Renoir's greatest asset, his art. In 1881, he visited Italy and studied, for the first time, the great artists of the Italian Renaissance. The work of Raphael made an especially telling impact. From studying old masters like Raphael, Renoir concluded that in comparison, his own work was lacking in technical rigor. As he said himself later, "I had traveled as far as Impressionism could take me, and I realized the fact that I could neither paint nor draw." His newfound opinion immediately began to influence his work. Whilst still in Italy, he painted The Blonde Bather, whose lines are far harder than those in his previous Impressionist work. Elements of his 1884 canvas, The Umbrellas, are also indicative of Renoir's new approach, what he later termed the period of his manière art, or harsh manner.
Renoir Morgan, it tends to show triangles
Dr. Vikram
from the
Talukdar, nice. Thank you.
from the monos that I see. The fluid finishes from Raphael. It's possibly because of his background, in the sense he was finding his feet maturing. What he had not done, it's become very clear, was his respect for classical and later critics, taking Frenchman, Poussin, or 17th century people renowned and he seemed to have the much more forceful approach to those even in that way, a forceful approach for epic conflict and his so-called harsh later work to return his eighth trade Smith, which again were in this should be original so Lucia, kind of appears to be less harsh